I'm never surprised by controversies that are whipped up in Washington, right? That's par for the course.
President Obama brushing off criticism of the Bergdahl prisoner swap is Washington politics as usual, and we're back now with the panel. George, one of the problems with this controversy is that it's just the latest in a series of issues for this president, starting with the Obamacare website disaster, then all the problems with the way the president handled Ukraine and Putin. We just got out of the VA scandal, and now we have this Bergdahl controversial prisoner swap. And I guess the question is there a cumulative effect here? It's not just one, but one after another that raises questions about the president's competence.
It raises questions about his competence and Democrats' defections from him. But before the three crises that you just mentioned, there were two others. Last autumn, the president clearly wanted to make Larry Summers the new head of the Fed, and a rebellion among Democrats stopped him. He clearly wanted authorization to use force against Syria, and a rebellion among Democrats stopped him. Now, those are two core presidential powers, the appointive power and the war-making power. So this has been a long time coming. There are 5 crises, in effect, going all the way back to late last summer. And it does indicate that Democrats themselves are withdrawing their support from the president, who goes ahead with his own agendas. The EPA rules this week that complicate matters for a number of Democrats seeking re-election. I don't think I've seen worse relations between the White House and Congress since the late Carter years.
On the other hand, the polls so far are pretty evenly split on the Bergdahl release as to whether people approve or disapprove of it, which raises the question, Mara, is it possible that folks here in Washington are overestimating, given how war-weary the country is, whether they're going to be outraged about anything that seems to move us a little bit closer to the exit in Afghanistan?
I think there's no evidence yet that this is going to affect individual Senate races. Now, will it remind the Republican base of all the reasons they don't like President Obama? Yes, and they're pretty energized to begin with. But I do think there is a risk for Republicans here. They can veer into right-wing political correctness when they talk about impeachment, when they talk about the father's beard, as Juan mentioned. He looks like a lot of bikers in Idaho to me. I mean, to say that somehow that means he's a Muslim or Islamic sympathizer, when they question whether he should be, Bergdahl should have been searched for and released at all. So I think there is a risk there, but I think it definitely hurts the president. He's already, in trouble this election year, but as a determinative factor in Senate races around the country, I don't think so.
Then there is Hillary Clinton, who is now beginning the big offensive. You thought D-Day was big. This is the rollout of her new book, Hard Choices, and it turns out that she did oppose an earlier swap for Bergdahl, and there have been leaks from the book. Her camp has leaked that in the book she says she knew opening the door to negotiations with the Taliban would be hard to swallow for many Americans after so many years of war. And here's what she says in her first interview about the book.
One of our values is we bring everybody home off the battlefield the best we can. It doesn't matter how they ended up in a prisoner of war situation.
It doesn't matter?
It does not matter. We bring our people home.
Steve, sort of like, what difference does it make?
Yeah, well, I think one of the reasons that this is going to be so challenging for her is she has to answer for all of these things, particularly in the foreign policy and national security arena, where she served with the president for 4 years. So we're going to see her do this delicate dance where she's defending the administration, defending its choices, and at the same time trying to create some distance where these things are going to be politically difficult. I think this will end up being politically very problematic for the president for precisely the opposite reason than the one the president posited. This is not something that was whipped up in Washington. This is something that I think took place, in Afghanistan. We sent back these Guantanamo detainees. I think at a very base level, people who aren't following politics day in and day out are looking at these Guantanamo 5 and saying, why in the world would we do this? And the conflicts that we're hearing within the administration's own story. I mean, the administration went to court to keep one of these 5 in jail at Guantanamo just 3 years ago, because he was such a huge risk, such a risk to U.S. national security, and now they're letting him walk. Those are things you don't have to have a PhD in national security studies to understand. That just doesn't make sense.
Juan, Does this mess, and I think we would all agree that it's been a mess this week, does it have any impact either in the 2014 midterms or for Hillary Clinton in 2016?
I think for Mrs. Clinton, she initially, in the book apparently says that she was opposed to the deal, and then has come to the point where she says she was willing to negotiate because she wanted to get Bergdahl back, and now she says, well, she's supportive of the administration's decision, as you just heard. So for her, I think it's a matter of, I think this fits the title of her book, Hard Choices, right? So, you know, Mrs. Clinton grappling with difficult issues in difficult times. I think that it doesn't have much consequence for her political future. For Democrats, this is interesting because you've heard from Senator Dianne Feinstein in the Congress saying, we were not informed. To Democrats on the Hill this week, they feel like they've been left behind by the administration. They think the administration's not keeping them up to date, not allowing them to prepare for the political fallout that comes with such a controversy. And if that attends to what George was talking about, the EPA decision, to some extent the administration feels they had to make that call. But you can go back to other situations where they just want the administration to communicate with them, to make them feel like they are on the same team. And right now, the administration is so angry at the inaction in Congress and the fact that House Republicans are able to block, obstruct, however you want to describe it, so much activity, that they tend to turn away and say, we're just going to be about our business, and if the Congress wants to sit there as an impediment to any action, let the American people judge them.
Well, one quick point, and we have only about 30 seconds left, George, and that is the president's approval rating is a huge factor in a midterm. In the 6th year of a two-term president since 1946, if the president's approval rating is over 50%, his party loses 14 seats in the House. If it's under 50%, they lose 36 seats. So anything that contributes to people not feeling good about Obama could also hurt Democrats.
Numerous Democrats seeking election to the Senate this year are being required to run 5 to 8 points ahead of the president's job approval. Very difficult.
Thank you, panel. See you next week.